When I first met Penny, it was during a summer volunteer program at a local hospital. She was a student nurse then, and her dedication caught my attention long before her smile did. I was a budding architect working on a side project for the hospital's expansion, and fate had us crossing paths in the break room one afternoon. She laughed at my clumsy attempt to reach the top shelf for a mug and offered to help, instantly disarming me with her warmth. Our early days together were a whirlwind of late-night phone calls and shared dreams. She wanted to make a difference in pediatric care, and I dreamed of designing homes that brought joy to families. We supported each other through those years of hard work and limited resources, often sharing meals of instant noodles and making do with thrift store finds for furniture. Despite the struggles, we were happy just being together. Our first major hurdle came when Penny's father fell seriously ill. Balancing her studies and part-time work with caring for him put immense strain on her, and I did what I could to lighten the load. It was during this period that I saw her resilience and compassion in full force, qualities that deepened my love for her. We became each other's pillars of strength, and those challenging months solidified our bond. Marriage followed not long after graduation, and we found joy in building a life together, even as the responsibilities piled up. Our first child arrived 3 years later, and I can still recall how Penny's face lit up when she held him for the first time. Over the years, she juggled her nursing career and motherhood with a grace I admired, even if it often left her drained. By the time our youngest was born, the cracks in our seemingly perfect life began to show. Penny put her dreams of advancing her career on hold, prioritizing our children's needs and the financial challenges we faced. I focused on work to keep us afloat, and though we remained close, the stresses of daily life often left little room for the romance and connection we once shared. Now, with the children grown and gone, I'd envisioned a new chapter, a chance to rekindle what we'd lost amid the chaos. I wanted us to reclaim the passion and partnership that had once defined our relationship. Little did I know that the journey ahead would test us in ways I could never have foreseen. Penny and I have been together for almost 3 decades, and this past year marked a significant turning point for us. Our youngest left for college, officially transitioning us into the phase of being empty nesters. I saw it as an opportunity to deepen our connection and nurture the parts of our relationship that had taken a back seat during our years of raising children. Our home, though small, didn't offer much in the way of privacy, but I had a plan to reignite the romance. After we dropped off our daughter, I swept Penny into my arms and carried her upstairs, laughing off her light-hearted objections about needing a shower after the drive. The evening was passionate, and her enthusiasm sparked a sense of optimism in me about this new chapter of our lives. At 48, Penny's charm hadn't faded, and my love for her remained steadfast. Penny has been a nurse since we met, though life, 3 kids, financial stress, and endless responsibilities kept her from advancing in her career. Frustration about being stuck in the same role while younger nurses climbed the ranks often left her visibly upset. After what I thought was a great night, Penny surprised me with a bold announcement. She had been planning to join a 6-month pediatric nursing training program. "The hospital needs pediatric nurses," she explained. "After training, I could specialize, and in a few years I might even lead the department or become matron. It'll help us save more for retirement by 60. I was stunned, both by her determination and the fact that she had planned this without telling me. "Why didn't you share this earlier?" I asked, feeling blindsided. Her response floored me further. "The program is out of state, an hour by car, 3 by flight. I'll be gone for 6 months. 6 months? I repeated, shocked. That's a long time. Isn't there another option? No, this is the only one. It's not that long in the big picture, Mike, she said, adding that couples endure far longer separations. I can fly home monthly, or you can visit me. I struggled to process it all. As I voiced my concerns, Penny cut me off. Don't be selfish, Mike. Selfish? I've always supported you and the kids, I replied, hurt. Her anger didn't waver. If this were your dream, I'd be expected to cheer you on. But because it's mine, it's selfish. I never said that, I countered. I just need time to process. You've had months, I've had minutes. Her tone softened as she explained that housing would be covered, and while frequent visits might not be practical, I could come once a month. Her passion was inspiring, but the suddenness left me reeling. Her reasoning seemed logical, but the gap between my hopes for this new phase of our lives and her plan left me reeling. I felt off balance, and that vulnerability left me open to persuasion. Penny leaned in, kissing my neck and seducing me into a second round of closeness. Let's face it, any man in my shoes would have been hard-pressed to resist. In the heat of the moment, I agreed to her plan. Then she dropped the final surprise. "The course starts next week," she said casually as she packed her bags. I stared at her, stunned. "Next week?" "You already agreed," she reminded me, leaving no room for debate. And just like that, she was gone, her excitement bubbling over as though she were a kid heading off to summer camp. She was so thrilled, she almost forgot to kiss me goodbye. Watching her leave, I couldn't help but feel like I'd been swept aside, my questions and concerns drowned in her whirlwind of enthusiasm. I have to admit, adjusting to a new daily routine wasn't easy for me. For years, I never gave much thought to how I'd spend my free time. Penny had always been the one who managed our social calendar. As long as she included me in the plans, I was content to let her take charge of that part of our lives. I know I'm not alone in this. Most of the guys I work with would say the same about their wives. Penny's evenings and weekends were often packed with activities she planned for the two of us, aside from the family responsibilities. Meanwhile, I handled the essential chores, mowing the lawn, washing the cars, and driving the kids to sports practices and games. But now, with her gone, my evenings stretched into long hours of loneliness and boredom. It wasn't that we'd been particularly adventurous or social before, but even the simple routines we had shared, like laughing at TV shows or talking about the news, were missing. I even found myself missing her habit of rubbing her feet while we relaxed together. During the first week of Penny's absence, we talked on the phone for about half an hour each evening. I couldn't help but wonder if she had factored in the rising phone bill when she budgeted for this new phase of her life. More than that, I found myself feeling envious. She was obviously thriving in her new environment, excited and fully immersed in the challenges she was facing. Our conversations revolved around her updates. Her enthusiasm was undeniable, and she often spoke of new people whose names meant nothing to me. It left me feeling excluded, as though I no longer had a place in this chapter of her life. Still, the calls ended warmly, leaving me hopeful that this temporary separation might deepen our connection when she returned. By the second week, our nightly chats had shrunk to about 20 minutes. Penny explained, "Mike, I need to stay focused. These calls pull me out of my studying mindset." Her words stung. I felt like I had been relegated to the role of an interruption. I tried to keep the conversations positive and loving, but by the end of the week, they started to feel one-sided. Despite my frustrations, I stayed supportive, keeping my loneliness to myself. By the third week, Penny suggested we talk every other evening instead of daily. "I'll call you, Mike," she said. "That way I can make sure it's a good time." Her calls became less frequent, and by the fourth week, they dwindled to just 2. She had her first major assignment and was working evening shifts, and I tried to be understanding. Still, it was hard. I missed her. I missed us. I'd planned to visit her that weekend, but fate had other ideas. Penny called to cancel my trip. "There's a flu outbreak, Mike. The hospital's overwhelmed and it wouldn't be safe. Besides, I won't have any time to spend with you." Disappointed, I resolved to make the best of the weekend. While stopping for gas, I ran into an old friend I hadn't seen in years. He invited me to join his poker group, which met every Saturday night at the local pub. Feeling tired of my routine and missing Penny's presence, I decided to go. The evening was enjoyable. We played cards in a back room before heading to the bar for drinks. After years of family-friendly outings, neighborhood cookouts, and kid-oriented activities, the pub was a revelation. I was surprised by the number of single women around my age, or slightly younger, who approached me with bold confidence. Some were unmistakably trying to pick me up. It was startling how after so many years of marriage, I had forgotten that these encounters still happened in bars. It took me a few weeks to notice a pattern. On nights when Penny didn't call, I found myself at the pub. At first, I chalked it up to coincidence, but as the visits became more frequent, it was hard to ignore. One evening, I turned to my friend Jeff and asked, "What's going on here?" Jeff laughed. "Mike, are you really that clueless? Haven't you noticed? At our age, there are way more single women than single men. This place is full of widows, divorcees, and women whose husbands traded them in for younger models." "But why are they approaching me?" I asked, genuinely puzzled. Jeff smirked. "Look at yourself. You're fit thanks to your job. You've still got your looks, and you're not weighed down by kids or an angry wife. If you took off that wedding ring, half the women here would be lining up to take you home tonight. No fancy lines, no drinks required." I glanced around, and noticed the attention I had been oblivious to before. Jeff followed my gaze and continued. Don't get me wrong. I know you love Penny, but let's say you were single. Women here are on the hunt, and you'd have no trouble finding someone. Just don't be too eager. Most of them are here for a quick fling or to boost their confidence. Jeff pointed to a table where a woman sat surrounded by friends. See her? She's probably just been dumped. Her friends are here to cheer her up. Give it a few weeks and she'll be looking for someone to help her feel desirable. Or to get even. He gestured toward another group of women laughing together at a different table. Now those ladies, they're here to have fun. Some are married, some aren't, but at least one of them would take a chance on a guy like you. They're not desperate, but they're open to opportunities. As I listened to Jeff, I couldn't help but feel uneasy. I wasn't looking to replace Penny, but the growing distance between us and the attention I was receiving left me wondering what this chapter of our lives would bring. As I sat nursing my drink, my phone buzzed with a text from Penny. She apologized, explaining she was too busy at work to call, and signed off with a quick, "Love you." I wanted to feel comforted, but the truth was her messages and calls had been growing more infrequent with each passing week. At least this one ended with, "Love you," which was more than her last few abrupt updates. I sent a short reply. "Love you too," then slipped my phone back into my pocket and turned to Jeff. "All right, Jeff," I said. "Let's test your theory. Prove your point." Jeff grinned. "Take off your wedding ring and head over to the bar near that table. Order yourself a drink and see what happens." Reluctantly, I removed the ring and slid it into my pocket. Following his suggestion, I moved to the bar and leaned casually against the counter, keeping the table in my peripheral vision as I waited for the bartender. It didn't take long. Within moments, one of the married women at the table discreetly slipped off her own wedding ring and walked over to me. She confidently offered to buy me a drink, but her interest evaporated the moment I mentioned that I was married. When I casually added that I'd noticed her removing her ring, her face flushed red, and she quickly retreated. Not long after, another woman from the same group approached. She placed an order for drinks, even though her table's glasses were still nearly full, and struck up a conversation. It was clear she wasn't really there for a round of drinks. I wasn't interested. And my distant body language must have given that away because she soon returned to her friends. I was finishing my drink and waiting for Jeff to return from the restroom when I heard a quiet "hi" behind me. Turning, I saw another woman from the table, the second unmarried one, standing there. Her approach was calm and composed, with none of the nervous energy I'd seen earlier. She exuded confidence, and her smile felt genuine, not calculated. If I'd been single, I might have found her intriguing. She was attractive, her honey blonde curls framing a face that looked both approachable and self-assured. Her figure was lean but healthy, and there was no wedding ring, or even a tan line to suggest one had been there. Out of habit, I glanced down at my own hand, where the absence of my ring left no telltale mark either. Tradition suggested I offer her a drink, but before I could, she raised her glass with a small smile. "No need," she said, her voice carrying an easy confidence that made her instantly likable. We started talking casually, the kind of light banter that doesn't feel forced. About 10 minutes in, I decided to come clean. "I should probably tell you, I'm married," I said, even though I wasn't wearing my ring. I could have lied or made an excuse, but something about her made me feel like honesty was the only choice. She raised an eyebrow but didn't look angry. "Then why come here without a ring? That feels misleading." I shook my head. "It's not what it looks like. My friend Jeff has this theory about women our age in bars, and he dared me to test it out. For what it's worth, one of your friends came up to me earlier and wasn't exactly shy about taking off her rings." She laughed, a warm, genuine sound. "That must have been Carol. She's not really my friend. I only met her tonight. She came with Sue, who I actually know. Honestly, when I saw her do that, I thought the same thing. Her poor husband." I nodded, relieved she wasn't offended. "For the record, I'm not here to cheat on my wife. I just needed a change of scenery. My wife's been away for a while, and it's been challenging." Her curiosity seemed piqued, so I explained further. "Penny's doing a 6-month training program out of state. It's been almost 2 months now, and I'm struggling more than I expected. She's busy with work and studying, so we barely talk anymore. That's why I'm here. Sitting at home alone every night is starting to get to me." Andrea, as I later learned her name was, offered a sympathetic smile. "You must miss her." "More than I can say," I admitted. "It's just been hard, feeling so disconnected. Coming here isn't about meeting anyone. I just needed to get out of the house and be around people." Andrea leaned forward slightly. So, you're not looking for anything else? Just conversation? Her bluntness surprised me, but I appreciated her directness. Exactly. I'm loyal to my wife, but that doesn't mean I can't enjoy a good conversation. She seemed to approve of my answer. Well then, let's keep talking. Our conversation flowed easily after that. Andrea shared that she and her husband had grown apart after their kids moved out, realizing they were strangers after years of focusing on family. They'd split 6 months earlier on amicable terms, and Andrea was now relishing her independence. Still, she admitted, she wasn't closed off to the idea of meeting someone if the right person came along. We talked for over an hour before her friends signaled they were ready to leave. Andrea hesitated for a moment, clearly debating whether to stay, but ultimately chose to go. It felt like a compliment that she'd even considered lingering, knowing there was no romantic potential between us. After weeks of feeling overlooked by Penny, it was refreshing to be seen and appreciated, even in a platonic way. As the weeks passed, Penny's calls became even shorter and more sporadic. When I tried to bring it up, her response was dismissive. Stop acting like a child, Mike, she snapped. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Acting like a child? I countered. I'm just pointing out that we barely talk anymore. But my words didn't seem to matter. After that, she didn't call for 5 days. Frustrated and tired of feeling insignificant, I started going to the bar more often. My plans to visit Penny were canceled again when she told me her workload was too overwhelming. The rejection stung. It felt like I wasn't worth the effort. After 10 weeks apart, I was no longer a priority, just an inconvenience in her busy life. In our recent conversations, Penny didn't even ask about my life or what I was up to. The following week, she claimed she wasn't feeling well, blaming heavy periods and saying she wasn't in the mood for a visit. I wasn't surprised. Frustrated by her continued indifference, I broke our usual routine and called her cell phone. One of her roommates picked up. Penny's taken some sleeping pills and gone to bed, she explained. She asked me to hold on to her phone so she wouldn't be disturbed. While Penny seemed increasingly detached, I found myself settling into an unexpectedly active social life. It beat sitting at home waiting for calls that never came. I joined a Thursday night darts league, filling in for a team that needed an extra player, and started attending Tuesday trivia nights, which turned out to be surprisingly enjoyable. I met new people, but I was always clear about my boundaries. Single women knew up front that I was married and not looking to cheat. Andrea became a regular at the pub with her friends, and we often chatted when she was there. She briefly dated a guy, but ended things after 2 weeks. He failed the severity test, she said with a laugh, leaving me both amused and curious about her standards. Andrea avoided prying into my situation with Penny, and she never offered opinions about my wife. I appreciated her discretion, especially since I was grappling with my own frustration and anger. After 14 weeks apart, Penny and I still barely spoke, and when we did, the conversations felt cold and rushed. I started to wonder if I even mattered to her anymore. Yes, she was busy, but would regular texts or short calls really interfere with her goals? It felt like I'd been discarded, cast aside as though I didn't exist. The more time I spent with Andrea, the more I enjoyed her company. She was warm, clever, and refreshingly down to earth. Her humor was infectious, and I found myself looking forward to our talks. When she needed help, like dealing with an overly persistent guy at the bar, she'd give me a subtle signal. I'd step in, kiss her cheek, and play the role of her boyfriend until the guy got the hint and left. Then we'd laugh about it and carry on as usual. What troubled me most was how much I looked forward to seeing her. Our conversations weren't romantic or inappropriate. We debated trivial topics like Pepsi versus Coca-Cola. But when she wasn't there, I couldn't deny the pang of disappointment I felt. For the first time, I truly understood how easily someone could be drawn into an affair. Clichés I'd once dismissed, my wife doesn't understand me or my wife ignores me, suddenly felt uncomfortably familiar. I wasn't justifying infidelity, but I finally understood how someone might slide into it. I was tempted, more than I cared to admit. I never imagined I'd be in such a position, but as Penny's indifference grew, so did the temptation. I hadn't crossed any lines with Andrea. So far, I'd managed to keep things respectful and appropriate, but I wasn't blind to the fact that my self-control was being tested. Penny's behavior didn't help. Her growing absence and lack of interest in our marriage left me feeling like I was teetering on the edge. I wondered if she felt the same temptations, but I quickly dismissed the thought. Between her work and studies, she didn't have the time or energy to think about me, let alone someone else. We were only halfway through her 6-month course, but I knew something had to change. If things stayed the same, or got worse, our marriage might not survive the remaining weeks. I never thought I'd be the kind of man tempted to stray, but I could no longer deny how real the possibility had become. Determined to salvage our relationship, I decided to call Penny instead of waiting for her to reach out. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, trying to sound upbeat. "I can't talk for long," she replied immediately. I swallowed my irritation. Getting angry wouldn't help. "I understand you're busy," I said evenly, "but I need you to make time for this. I'll keep it brief." She sighed impatiently, a sound that only added to my frustration, but I pressed on. "Penny, it feels like you don't have time for me anymore. Our calls are rare, and when we do talk, you act like I'm a burden. I have feelings and needs too. It's like you've forgotten there are two people in this marriage. Yes, I want to support and encourage you, but I also need some of your attention." Her response was swift and defensive. "Are you kidding me, Mike? I've spent my entire adult life putting this family first. Now it's my turn." I clenched my jaw but stayed calm. "You're making it sound like I haven't sacrificed for this family. I've given up so much to put you and the kids first. So tell me, Penny, when exactly was it my turn? Did I miss it while working overtime to make ends meet?" Her voice rose sharply. "How dare you, Mike? How dare you? I've worked just as hard and sacrificed just as much. You ignorant son of a—" I let her rant without interrupting, listening as she hurled insults and anger my way. When she finally paused, I took a deep breath and tried again. "Penny, this isn't about who sacrificed more. It's about our marriage. If we keep going like this, there won't be anything left by the time you finish this course." Her response was cold and dismissive. "You're being so dramatic. Stop whining and grow up, Mike." Her words stung, and I hung up before the conversation could spiral further. My phone buzzed almost immediately with her return call. "Look, I'm sorry," she said, her tone softening, "but you have to understand how important this is to me. I need this. Our marriage is fine." I bit back the urge to argue. She wasn't listening. "I miss you too," she added, "and I'm sorry you're struggling, but in the long run, this is for us. You'll see. We're already halfway there. When I get back, I'll take care of the house again, and you'll eat properly." Her words felt hollow, but I said nothing. I just hoped we'd have a marriage left to fix when she returned. Her tone had felt patronizing, as if I were a helpless child who couldn't function without her. Yes, it's hard being without her, I thought, but not for the reasons she thinks. What I missed wasn't just her presence. It was the deeper connection we shared, the closeness, the conversations, the sense of partnership. After nearly 3 decades of marriage, her absence left a gaping hole in my life, as though a part of me had been severed. I made a vague noise of acknowledgement, which she seemed to take as agreement. "Great. Glad we're on the same page. I really have to go," she said briskly, ending the call without so much as a goodbye, let alone an "I love you." Frustrated and restless, I grabbed my keys and drove to the pub, hoping a beer would help dull the disappointment. But as I sat nursing my drink, I realized coming here was a mistake. I wasn't in the mood for small talk or the friendly noise of the bar. My emotions churned, hurt, anger, and something harder to name. Like a shadow of anxiety I couldn't shake. Not even Andrea's cheerful wave across the room could lift my spirits. I finished my drink quickly, muttered a half-hearted goodbye, and left. When I got home, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Andrea. "Are you okay? You didn't seem yourself tonight. If you need someone to talk to, I'm here." I stared at the message, feeling an unexpected lump in my throat. In just a few months, Andrea, a woman I barely knew before all this, showed more concern for me than my wife of 28 years. The realization hit me like a punch. I slumped onto the couch, staring at the text, unsure how to respond. For the first time, I felt a flicker of fear. Had I let Andrea get too close? Was I crossing a line emotionally? I hadn't confided in her about Penny or our marriage, and I'd avoided saying anything that I wouldn't admit openly. But still, I could sense how easy it would be to let things slide into dangerous territory. I needed to be careful. After composing myself, I typed out a reply. "Thanks, Andrea. Just a rough day, but I'm fine. See you Thursday if you're around. Take care." I reread it several times, checking the tone before hitting send. Then I grabbed some leftovers, eating them cold at the kitchen counter, while my mind wandered. Penny and I hadn't even discussed my next visit. She hadn't brought it up, and I didn't want to wait any longer to see her. I decided on the spur of the moment to surprise her with a trip. Maybe seeing her in person would remind us both of what we were fighting for. Friday afternoon, I left work early, caught a flight, and by early evening, I was standing outside Penny's place. The door opened to a young woman I recognized from previous calls, her roommate, Jenny. She looked surprised, but smiled and led me into their modest living room. "Penny and Gail aren't back from school yet," she explained. As I reached for my phone to let Penny know I was there, Jenny stopped me. "I can call her," she offered quickly. Before she could dial, the sound of a key turning in the lock drew our attention. Penny stepped inside, her expression flickering between shock and delight. "Mike," she said, giving me a quick kiss. "What a surprise. Be right back," she added, heading straight to the bathroom. I noticed she took her phone with her, which struck me as odd, but I kept quiet. Jenny and I exchanged some awkward small talk while waiting. Penny took longer than I expected, and when she finally emerged, she barely paused before disappearing into her room, calling back, "Keep chatting with Jenny." Jenny seemed to relax once Penny was out of sight, and our conversation became more natural. We even laughed a little, though I couldn't shake the strange vibe in the apartment. Penny busied herself in her room, tidying up and carrying sheets to the laundry. I watched her move back and forth, wondering if she was trying to make an impression, like she used to when we first started dating. Eventually, Penny invited me to shower and freshen up before we headed out to dinner. I noticed her open the window wide, letting in the chilly air, something she'd always hated, but I chose not to comment. Seeing her undressed again after so many months stirred feelings I'd been suppressing. I suggested skipping dinner and enjoying some private time, but she shook her head, laughing. "Patience, Mike. After dinner, I'm starving." We ended up at a seafood restaurant Penny had mentioned before. Over 2 bottles of Riesling, we talked and laughed, revisiting memories that felt light years away. When I cracked my old joke about oysters, "They're supposed to be an aphrodisiac, but I ate 12 once, and the last 3 didn't work," she laughed so hard that for a moment everything felt right. But something was off. Penny's phone buzzed constantly, and she seemed glued to it, answering texts in the middle of our conversation. I tried to ignore it at first, but it was impossible not to notice. Finally, I decided to speak up. "Penny, I don't want to make a big deal out of this, but texting at dinner feels a little rude." She looked up, a hint of guilt in her expression. "I know, but some of the younger students see me as a mentor. They need advice. I won't be long." Her explanation didn't sit well with me, but I let it go, focusing instead on trying to make the evening feel like one of our old date nights. Penny asked how long I planned to stay, her tone so casual it bordered on indifferent. It felt like she was already calculating how soon she could send me home. I swallowed my disappointment and reminded myself that this was about reconnecting, no matter how uncomfortable the vibe felt. When we returned to her place, it was nearly 11. Another car was parked in the driveway, which Penny explained belonged to Gail, her other roommate, who worked late shifts at a restaurant. The apartment was quiet and dimly lit. After dinner, wine, and the earlier shower, I was ready to reconnect in more ways than one. I picked Penny up and carried her to her room, laying her on the bed. But as much as I wanted to lose myself in her, there was a strange tension in the air, something unspoken that kept me from fully relaxing. It felt as though the woman in my arms was a stranger, and that unsettling feeling lingered long after we turned out the lights. Dinner had been awkward, like we were 2 strangers trying to make small talk. The conversation lacked any of the warmth or ease we used to share, and I found myself thinking back to the beginning of our relationship. Those uncertain, nerve-wracking early days of trying to impress one another, except this time it felt hollow, like we were going through the motions. Later, as Penny lay sprawled on the bed, slightly drunk, I began to undress her. To my surprise, she responded in a way that felt completely unfamiliar. Her moans were louder, her movements more exaggerated, almost theatrical. Penny had always been reserved in moments like this, her modesty a hallmark of her personality. But tonight, there was none of that restraint. She was wild, almost unrecognizable. Before I could make sense of her unusual behavior, a loud, impatient knock shattered the moment. The flimsy bedroom door rattled as a woman's irritated voice cut through the air. "Penny! Seriously, Jake? 3 nights in a row? Some of us need sleep!" The words landed like a punch to the gut. My mind raced, piecing together every odd detail from the past few months. The shaved pubic area, the sudden resistance to my visits, the awkwardness earlier in the evening, the fresh bed linens, and her prolonged time in the bathroom when she first got home. It all made sense now. Jake? Was he the one she had been texting at dinner? I turned to look at Penny, and her wide-eyed expression confirmed everything. Her lips parted as though to offer an explanation, but no words came out. She looked disheveled, her makeup smeared, her hair in disarray. The legs I once admired now made my stomach churn. I felt sick. Without saying a word, I began dressing, every movement stiff and deliberate as I struggled to keep my anger in check. My hands moved mechanically as I zipped my carry-on bag. I refused to look at her, knowing my temper was teetering on the edge. She wasn't worth losing control over. Penny, sensing my resolve, suddenly became defensive.
6 months is a long time, she shouted. You've only been gone for 15 weeks. What did you expect? I bet you've been cheating too. Why should I sit here and wait while you're off doing whatever you want? I deserve to have fun too. For once, I felt young and free, not like some old woman stuck waiting to become a grandmother.
Her words barely registered. I slung my bag over my shoulder and muttered, "At least now I know." Desperation seeped into her tone.
It's not just Jake, she yelled. We can get through this. We can fix it.
I stopped and turned, my voice calm but firm.
No, Penny, we can't.
She started shouting again as I walked down the hallway, her words becoming more frantic with each step I took. Muffled voices from the other rooms signaled her roommates had noticed the commotion, but I didn't care. My only goal was to leave. Reaching the front door, I yanked it open just as someone pulled it from the other side. Standing there was a young woman I assumed to be Gail, her face a mix of confusion and curiosity. Behind her, Jenny hovered uncertainly. Her expression caught somewhere between pity and discomfort. Gail's brow furrowed as she asked sharply, "Who are you?" Without pausing, I walked past her, tossing a reply over my shoulder. "Penny's ex-husband." I emphasized the word ex before stepping into the cool night air and letting the door slam shut behind me. I took a deep breath, the crisp air biting at my skin, and felt a strange mix of anger and relief. My marriage was over, that much was clear. There was a plane to catch, a lawyer to call, and a lifetime of pieces to pick up. But for now, there was also a story to tell, a shattered heart to mend, and perhaps in time someone new to share a drink with. Maybe even a honey blonde with a kind smile and a listening ear waiting at the bar.
I flinched when Mike picked up the phone, startled by the sound of his voice. After 4 days of unanswered calls, I'd all but given up hope of reaching him. "Penelope, what's wrong? I can't talk for long," he said, his tone clipped and businesslike. The words I'd rehearsed, the apologies I'd planned, they all evaporated. I froze, blindsided not by anger or sorrow but by his indifference. He didn't sound hurt, furious, or even disappointed. Instead, there was an air of detachment, like I was a distant acquaintance interrupting his day. I opened my mouth to speak but hesitated too long. His sigh crackled through the line, heavy with impatience. "Look, Penelope, I don't have time for this. If it's important, say it quickly. I'm busy. It's quiz night." "Quiz night?" The words tumbled out before I could stop them. "That's your excuse? How can you prioritize a trivia game over our marriage?" His response was icy. "Clearly, Penelope, you don't understand. Quiz night is important to me. I need this." The echo of those last words, "I need this," stung. They brought back memories of conversations we'd had in recent months, ones I'd brushed aside or dismissed. Now they hung between us, sharper and more cutting than I'd expected. "Don't belittle our marriage like that," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We need to talk." Mike's tone turned exasperated. "Why should I bother? You don't listen anyway. I've got to go. My team relies on me. Maybe we'll talk later." The line went dead before I could respond. I stared at my phone, half expecting it to flash back to life, as if some mistake had been made. But no, he'd hung up. Just like that. The glass of wine I'd poured earlier, meant to calm my nerves, now tasted bitter, like regret itself. I sat motionless, replaying the brief conversation in my mind, anger and sadness bubbling under the surface. I should have gone home days ago. Waiting had been a mistake. I should have confronted him in person, no matter how difficult it might have been. But I hadn't. I'd hesitated, trapped by a swirl of fear, guilt, and self-doubt. And then there was the training program. It wasn't just an excuse. It was a real priority. The exam on Monday was critical, the culmination of 3 months of work. I'd poured my energy into preparing for it, hoping that the focus would keep me from obsessing over Mike's silence. Now the exam was over, and I was out of distractions. Still, I hadn't booked a ticket home. I told myself it was because of logistics, but deep down, I knew the truth. Facing Mike on his turf, our house, felt too real. The apartment here had become a bubble, a place where I could pretend everything was still under control. I glanced at my phone, my thumb hovering over the messages from Jake. The temptation to open them was overwhelming, but I resisted, locking the screen and setting it aside. I walked to the kitchen, hoping food might distract me, but even the simplest meal felt like too much effort. Defeated, I returned to my room and lay down, staring blankly at the ceiling. The thoughts I'd been avoiding came rushing in. How could I make Mike understand that my actions weren't about him? That they didn't diminish my love for him or the life we'd built together? Our marriage wasn't in jeopardy. It never had been. My heart still belonged to him, and it always would. A flicker of frustration surfaced. Why couldn't he see past his pride? Yes, I'd made mistakes. Big ones. But they didn't define us. My indiscretions were physical, nothing more. My heart, my mind, my loyalty to him as a partner had never wavered. Couldn't he understand that? And yet, a small voice inside me whispered that I was rationalizing. My actions had hurt him deeply, no matter how I tried to frame them. I rolled over and my eyes landed on Mike's deodorant sitting on the nightstand, a forgotten remnant of his hasty departure. I picked it up, the scent hitting me like a tidal wave of memories. Tears burned my eyes as I clutched it to my chest, the pain of his absence sharper than ever. I tried to focus on the positives. Mike hadn't told the kids. They hadn't called, which meant they were still unaware. He hadn't exploded in anger or thrown insults at me. That had to be a good sign, didn't it? But another thought crept in, dark and insidious. What if his calm demeanor was just a mask? What if behind the scenes he was planning his next move, meeting with lawyers, freezing our accounts, changing the locks? My stomach churned and I shot out of bed, rushing to grab my laptop. My hands shook as I opened it and logged into our shared bank account. Relief washed over me when I saw the balance untouched. Mike hadn't done anything, yet. But as I stared at the screen, another wave of anxiety hit. Just because he hasn't acted now doesn't mean he won't, a voice in my head whispered. Closing the laptop, I buried my face in my hands. I couldn't escape the gnawing sense that everything was slipping further out of control. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the keyboard, before transferring a small sum to an old account in my name. It was just enough for a plane ticket, food, and transportation. Barely a safety net, but enough to feel like I had options. As I moved to log out, a notification caught my eye. A message. From Jake. Jake, the gorgeous 25-year-old whose flirtation had been a fleeting escape from reality. Too old to date my daughters, but young enough to make me feel alive, desired, and reckless. My eyes welled up again as the emotions I'd been pushing down surged forward. I hated myself for wanting to call him, for wanting him to look at me the way he had before, with hunger and admiration, for the way his words had made me feel hot and unstoppable. I cursed myself for letting it start in the first place. One too many drinks at a class gathering, trying to blend in with peers so much younger than me. It had felt exhilarating, forbidden, and intoxicating. And then it had spiraled. I knew if I responded to Jake's messages, he would come, and I wanted him to. That thought sent a jolt of guilt through me, and I whimpered, biting my knuckle to keep the sound from escaping. I had to stop. If Mike came back and found out, it would be the end of everything. Turning onto my stomach, I accidentally knocked the laptop off the bed. It hit the floor with a loud crash, but I didn't care. I buried my face in the pillow, tears soaking the fabric as I cried for everything I'd lost, and for the steep price I knew I'd have to pay to rebuild what remained. I couldn't give in again. I couldn't let this dependence destroy what little chance I had left. At some point, exhaustion overtook me. When I opened my eyes, sunlight was pouring through the window. I felt groggy and drained, but I forced myself out of bed and into the bathroom. The shower scalded my skin, grounding me. Later, as I inserted my key into the lock of our house, relief flooded me. It turned without resistance. Mike hadn't changed the locks. It was a small mercy, but a powerful one. He hadn't drained the bank accounts, hadn't told the kids, and hadn't filed for divorce. Days had passed since our last strained conversation. He'd had plenty of time to act, but the lock worked. This had to be a sign. Mike would forgive me. It might take time, but he would. He loved me, and he was a good man, the best man I'd ever known. Of course, our marriage wouldn't be the same. I would have to earn his trust again, every day. And Mike? He would carry the knowledge that I had turned to someone else for comfort. But we could survive this. We had to. Opening the door, I stepped into a house that felt almost foreign after so many months. I expected chaos, a mess left by a man living alone, but was instead met with pristine order. The living room was spotless. Curious, I wandered into the kitchen. Clean. The dining room? Not a speck of dust. It was as if he'd prepared for my return, which felt like another hopeful sign. But where was he? It was 6:30. He should have been home by now, probably looking for dinner. I walked to the stove and ran my fingers over the burners. Cold. Opening the fridge, I found it fully stocked, with a plate of fried chicken and vegetables neatly wrapped in plastic. Had he made dinner for me? Or had he eaten out? There were no dirty dishes in the sink, no crumbs on the counter. He could have cleaned up, but something about the scene didn't sit right. I considered texting him, but our last conversation made me hesitate. He hadn't responded to my flight details or offered to pick me up from the airport. Sighing, I filled the kettle to make tea, trying to make sense of the mixed signals. On one hand, he hadn't done anything to suggest he wanted to end our marriage. On the other, his silence spoke volumes. Perhaps he was trying to punish me, letting me stew in my own guilt. Tea in hand, I sat at the dining table and stared at the chairs around me. Memories of family dinners flooded my mind. Laughter, banter, the chaotic energy of raising kids. We weren't wealthy, but our home had always been rich with love. Mike would remember that too. He wasn't the kind of man to let our children feel torn between their parents. For their sake, if nothing else, he would try to forgive me. But where was he? Leaving my tea untouched, I climbed the stairs to our bedroom. It was clear he'd been home recently. The faint warmth of the bathroom lingered. Once again, the immaculate state of the room struck me. Mike had always been tidy, but I had expected some signs of bachelor life creeping in during my absence. Deep in thought, I returned downstairs, absently stirring my now cold tea. Something nagged at the back of my mind, a fragment of a conversation from early in my course. A name. Mike had mentioned someone. Was it John? Jason? None of those seemed right. And then it came to me. Jeff. I darted to the sideboard where we kept an old notebook, a relic from the days when we were too lazy to save numbers in our phones. Flipping through the worn pages, I found the entry. Jeff Saunders. The name was scrawled under S with a cell number added in a different ink, clearly an update from years later. I stared at the number, my heart pounding. Maybe Jeff held the missing pieces of the puzzle. I punched Jeff's number into my phone, my hands trembling as I pressed call. The line rang several times before it went to voicemail. Frustrated, I slammed my hand on the table, the sound echoing in the quiet room. A sudden ding from the microwave snapped me out of my anger. I'd forgotten all about the leftovers I'd reheated. Needing a distraction, I retrieved the plate and sat at the table. The chicken was better than I expected, perfectly seasoned and still moist. For a fleeting moment, I thought about Mike. Maybe I'd suggest he cook more often once we worked through this mess. That is, if we still had a chance to fix things. I set the empty plate in the sink, wiped my hands, and stared at my phone. My nerves twisted as I prepared to call Jeff again. What if Mike had confided in him? What if Jeff threw every detail back at me in anger? But avoiding the call wasn't an option. Taking a deep breath, I pressed redial. This time he picked up on the third ring. Hello? His voice was wary, with an edge I couldn't quite place. Hi, Jeff, I said, my voice trembling slightly. It's Penny Granger. I was wondering, do you know where Mike is? There was a long pause, filled with the muffled noise of voices and laughter in the background. My grip on the phone tightened as I waited. Penny, he said at last, his tone neutral. Long time. Yes, I said awkwardly. It has been. How are you? And Jane, the kids? Jane's fine. he said, his tone pointed as if daring me to forget her name. The kids are great. Thanks for asking. And you? There it was, that knowing tone in Jeff's voice. He already knew. I've been better, I admitted, fumbling for words. Is Mike with you? Yes, he is, Jeff said. And where are you? I asked, trying to keep my tone steady. We're at a darts competition, he replied casually. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay calm. That sounds fun. Where's it being held? At the pub, Jeff answered. Which pub? I pressed, trying to mask my growing frustration. My local one, he said with infuriating nonchalance. Jeff, I said tightly, my patience slipping. What's the name of the pub? The Royal, he finally admitted. I clenched my jaw, refusing to give him the satisfaction of another question. Thank you, I said curtly and hung up. His parting words, dripping with sarcasm, anything for Mike's loving wife, echoed in my mind. I opened my laptop and typed The Royal Pub into the search bar. Predictably, there were several results. Royal Arms, Royal George, Royal Oak. After combing through event pages and websites, I finally found it. The Royal Oak, hosting a couples darts competition. I grabbed my bag and paused at the hallway mirror. My reflection stared back, disheveled and far from my best. With shaking hands, I combed my hair and touched up my makeup. It wasn't perfect, but it would have to do. Sliding into the driver's seat of my car, I punched the Royal Oak's address into my GPS. The drive was short, but it felt like an eternity. My mind raced with questions and scenarios, none of which brought me any comfort. When I arrived, I was relieved to see the pub had its own parking lot. After squeezing into one of the last spaces, I sat in the car for a moment, trying to collect myself. The noise from inside reached my ears, laughter and chatter spilling out as someone opened the door. Taking a deep breath, I got out and headed in. The pub's main room was packed, the air warm with the hum of voices and the occasional thud of darts hitting their mark. My eyes scanned the room, searching for Mike. When I finally spotted him, my stomach twisted. He was seated near the dartboards, watching a game intently. Beside him sat a blonde woman, her posture relaxed, her hand resting casually on the table near his. She wasn't watching the game. She was watching the door, watching me. Our eyes locked, and in that instant, I knew. Her expression was calm but knowing, as though she had been expecting me. I froze, heat rising to my cheeks as she leaned closer to Mike and lightly touched his hand. Mike turned to her first, then followed her gaze to meet mine. I don't know what I had prepared for, anger, sadness, or even guilt. But it wasn't this. His face showed no emotion. He looked steady, composed, and completely unaffected. That calmness cut deeper than any outburst could have. I didn't realize someone was standing beside me until a familiar voice broke through the haze. Penny, Jeff said, stepping into my line of sight. I startled, taking a small step back. Jeff, I stammered. I came to see Mike. I figured, he said dryly, his tone far from welcoming. Is he okay? I asked, the words tumbling out. I mean, after everything? Jeff raised an eyebrow. He's fine, better than fine, actually. Better? I repeated, incredulous. How could he be better? He's just hiding how hurt he is, isn't he? Mike's not the kind of man to let everyone see his pain. Hiding it? Jeff said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. If that's true, he deserves an award. I glanced past Jeff to see Mike laughing at something the blonde said. She leaned in closer, handing him a dart. He smiled warmly and lightly patted her hand before focusing on the dartboard. My chest tightened. Whatever this was, it wasn't casual. I felt a sharp pang of jealousy and regret. Who is she? I demanded, my voice low but firm. Jeff smirked. Andrea. She's been great for him. They make a good team, don't you think? I wanted to scream, to cry, to march over to Mike and demand answers. But I couldn't move. Instead, I stood there rooted to the spot as everything I thought I knew about my husband and our marriage crumbled around me. I had always understood the fleeting nature of my attraction to younger men. They were intoxicating in their way, charming, vibrant, and a welcome distraction. But ultimately, they left me hollow. Mike, on the other hand, had been my foundation. He offered something real, something enduring. He was the man who provided substance when I needed it most. I tried to sound casual as I pressed further, though my voice betrayed me. Is she here with someone? Married? Jeff's smirk widened, and I could tell he was enjoying my discomfort. Yes, she's here with someone. No, she's not married. A knot tightened in my stomach, and I felt my heartbeat quicken as I forced myself to ask the inevitable. Who is she here with? With Mike, he said, his tone flat, as if delivering a weather report. Even though I'd prepared myself for this, the words landed like a blow. I stumbled back a step, unable to mask the pain in my voice. Well, that didn't take long. Jeff's gaze hardened, his smirk fading. On the contrary, he said coldly. Mike's had 4 months to get used to being alone. He glanced back at the pair, watching as Andrea leaned in to whisper something to Mike, her laugh soft but unmistakably passionate. Jeff's lips curled into a faint smile. And it looks like he's adjusted just fine, he added, his tone sharp enough to cut. When he turned back to me, the smile was gone, replaced by a steely glare. But then again, so have you, he said, his words striking like a final verdict. It's been 8 years since the divorce, but the regret hasn't eased. Not a day goes by that I don't wish I could undo the choices that led to our separation. When it became clear that reconciliation was out of reach, I buried my pain in the arms of younger men. It was an escape, but a hollow one. Each fleeting connection only underscored what I'd lost. The thrill diminished with every encounter, leaving me chasing an illusion of fulfillment that slipped further out of reach. My relationships grew shorter, emptier, and more desperate. I crossed lines I once believed were beneath me, all in pursuit of something that no longer existed. Now I sit in my kitchen surrounded by silence. The house that once brimmed with warmth and laughter feels cold and empty without Mike. The echoes of a life I destroyed linger in every corner. The clock reminds me that it's time to leave for work. I grab my bag and head for the door, pausing briefly to catch my reflection in the mirror. A 56-year-old woman stares back at me, her face marked by the passage of time. The youthful glow that once turned heads has faded, and the men I once charmed, those vibrant 20-somethings, are now closer to 30 or 40, their interest waning. What options do I have? The good men my age have no interest in someone with a reputation like mine. I've thought about moving, starting fresh on the other side of the country. But that would mean leaving my children, and I already don't see them enough as it is. Meanwhile, I imagine Mike and Andrea living the life I threw away. They're probably lounging on a beach somewhere, sipping cocktails and enjoying the love I squandered. And here I am, changing hospital sheets, taking patient temperatures, and mourning the future I destroyed. My marriage, my career, my dignity. For what? For sugar. Sweet, fleeting sugar that dissolved the moment I tasted it. Blinking back tears, I square my shoulders and open the door. The world keeps moving, indifferent to my regrets. And as I step outside, I remind myself that no one cares. So why should I? After all these years, as I sit here reflecting, I realize there's no escaping the choices that shape our lives. Regret, it seems, is a companion you can never truly shake off, one that lingers in the quiet moments and sneaks into your thoughts when you least expect it. But regret is not the end of the story. It's a reminder, a constant whisper that life, no matter how messy, is still unfolding. Every misstep, every misjudgment has led me to this point. Not a perfect ending, perhaps, but one with its own kind of clarity. And now, as the dusk fades into night, I take a deep breath. I can't rewrite the past, but maybe, just maybe, I can still shape the future. It won't be easy, and it won't be quick, but somewhere inside, I know. This chapter isn't the final one. The pen is still in my hand,